Welcome to another episode of Altitude Advantage. I am your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. Across the table, we have our lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla, and our digital media contributor, Susanna Ware. It is game week. There is a big game this Saturday. It's going to be on NFL Network for all Broncos country that's going to watch at 2:30 Mountain Time. This matchup is a win and you're in situation for the Broncos or a win and stay home situation for the Bengals. And as we all remember, the last time the Broncos clinched the playoff berth was on Monday Night Football against the Bengals, a game that I was actually at. That was my first game ever at Broncos country. Just wanted to plug that in because I want to, and I think it's cool. But what are your thoughts before we get to comments and talking about Bo and the offense and the AFC playoff picture, just about, some fun Saturday football?
As we're cozy, we're sitting here, we're talking about the playoffs, a big game for the Broncos. Last week they had their chance against the Chargers, and I think that was the message all week, that we know they knew the kind of chance that they had, and this week they don't want to let it slip away. So a big one in Cincinnati. The weather could play a factor. It's supposed to be rainy, though kind of the latest update is that maybe that's only going to impact the fourth quarter or so. But it's a standalone game. Sean Payton talks a lot about, hey, when you are a good football team, you get to play in these prime time, these standalone games, and this is one of them. You're the only game on TV at the time. Joe Burrow, Bo Nix, Jamar Chase, Cortland Sutton, Trey Hendrickson, Nick Bonito, a lot of big names in this game. And the Bengals are still very much alive in the postseason chase as well. So you're going to get their best shot. And as Sean Payton said earlier this week, we're going to have to play. You don't have to play perfect, but you're going to have to play one of your very best games of the entire year to get a win. And, man, that'd be awesome if they could go out there and play one of those near perfect games and find a way to clinch a playoff spot.
Yeah, Suze, how you feel about Saturday's game, Saturday's matchup?
I'm excited. I mean, all the players say, these are the kind of games that you grow up dreaming about playing in, the ones that are high stakes, and playing important football in December is what you want to do. So I'm excited and looking forward to it.
It's important to play meaningful football in December because that's, like Suze just said, that's something that everyone strives for. I think for Broncos country, it's also just one of those games that it's exciting to have so much online. It's scary, but it's also exciting to know, just one win away from the first goal of reaching the playoffs. And I think that's a big moment with this matchup in particular. It's going to be really exciting to see. But I'm really excited to see the comments. I'm excited to see next week's comments because I feel like everyone's going to love our swag and our matching abilities on
they're
the show.
nice. We got the Denver D logo, 5280.
I know it's for the year, but I think a champ.
Yeah, champ. You got the little altitude summit markers. They're nice. It's comfortable.
Suze, how do you rate the sweaters?
10 out of 10.
There you hear it. You got it.
I had to not talk so that the camera could cut to her.
Oh, sorry. Did I mess it up? My apologies.
It's all right. You're the diva. We already know.
Yeah. All right. Some comments from the official YouTube page.
Let's go.
Wow, bro, that's wild. Says, my number one Christmas wish is for the Broncos to end the playoff drought this season. SZN. Nice. It's true.
Season.
That'd be a nice wish.
Season.
Cortland Sutton talked a little bit about that it would have to be a belated Christmas present.
Yeah.
But,
he was sorry that he couldn't give an early Christmas present. He's like, everyone likes late Christmas.
It's okay. Maybe shipping was delayed.
Stuff happens.
Yeah, that's true. There's a lot of, maybe the reindeer took a little pit stop. Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah.
I thought you were going to read the next comment.
I'm going to read the next comment. J4N Style 576 says, I'm a believer. This isn't over. Let's go Broncos. It's true.
Let's go Broncos.
Kenny Miller is talking about your outfit from last time. Said, love the sweater. I'm Jello.
Thank you.
Jello. Wow. I never heard Jello before.
Jello.
Lots of just Broncos with hearts, which is nice.
They're hopeful. It's the holiday season. Everyone's hopeful,
Kenny
optimistic.
Miller Sr. says, heart, confetti, let's go, Elisa.
Hey, let's go. Appreciate the, facade.
Excitement. Juan Zavala says, Merry Christmas, Broncos country, and Merry Christmas, Bo Nix. Yeah, Bo Nix. Hopefully he goes out there, throws some tubs as a late Christmas gift.
I know. Hey, when's his sports car getting delivered?
That was a hypothetical situation, to be clear. It's just we were playing a little game. Mm-hmm. That's all there was.
No, there was. Sorry.
That's all the comments. Not as maybe people were spending time with their loved ones or something instead of watching YouTube.
I mean,
I expect more.
Yes, but like you said, everyone is sudden with their family, and we'll have a lot of comments next week, I'm sure, because they're gonna look how dapper we look.
That's right.
You know, just saying. But looking at this
and
game,
we've heard a rumor that Suze is going to do something to drastically change her appearance.
Stay tuned.
Yeah,
next week's
stay
episode.
tuned. You're gonna have to come back and watch. I don't know.
What could it be?
What could it be? Now, so the comments are gonna go crazy.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, happy holidays again, Broncos country. Hope you guys all had a Merry Christmas or celebrate with your loved ones. As you kind of see the guys, they come in, they had practice this week, and I feel like it's not difficult, but it's interesting when you see like mixing football with Christmas, right? And as much as they miss out on time with their families, Cortland Sutton touched on that, saying like you need to surround yourself with people that understand like, yes, family is important. Yes, the holidays are important, but like our job is important, and the stakes are very high at this point in the season. And he just, stressed the fact that he's so grateful that he's surrounded by loved ones, family, friends that know, like, yes, it's Christmas time, but it's also a chance for him to make the postseason for the first time. And I think that's the mindset that really has trickled down to the rest of the guys of understanding, like, the stakes are high. We have an opportunity here to not go into week 18 with a win or stay-home situation. Let's take care of business on the road. And, they've won 4 games on the road so far this season. I know they obviously want more, but the 4 wins are the most wins by Denver as the away team since 2016. So they've been able to kind of string some wins together. I think the biggest thing is responding to the adversity and responding to the losses. And I think Bo Nix in particular talked about that and say, like, this team has that gene where, like, they're able to respond to losses. They're able to respond to adversity quickly. And you kind of see that, especially when you look back at the schedule. When they lost to the Chiefs, they came back and responded well their following game. So when you look at the stakes of this game, how do you see this team keeping, a straight line and not kind of panicking, but also having that sense of urgency?
Yeah, I don't think there's panic at all. Panic, as our friend Suze would say.
You sound like Court. There's no panic. There's no panic. He was very adamant about that.
Yeah, I don't. There's no reason to panic after a 7-point loss. Obviously, I think the way that game played out against the Chargers, where you go up, 21-10, 24-13, and it felt like you were rolling toward a postseason berth. The fact that they then stormed back and went on a 21-point run makes it feel like an opportunity slipped away. But like if it had been a back and forth game to get to 34-27, you're probably not feeling the same way. And against the Chargers the first time, you're down 23-0 and make a late surge, and it ends up being 23-16. And yet I feel like people were more upset after this game than they were after that game, which was so it just part of it is just how it played out, obviously, and the defense does need to kind of get back to the way they were playing. But I think your point about the road game is interesting because typically if you're a good team, a playoff team, you're going to win 70-80% of your games at home. And then even if you can, we talked about this a long time ago, even if you can split your road games, you're doing a good job. And if you look at the Broncos' schedule this year, they've only lost 2 home games, Steelers and Chargers. And on the road, they've found a way to, right now, as you said, be 4-4. And so if they can get that deciding kind of win and get to 5-4 on the road, it would be a big deal. It would obviously clinch the playoff berth. But I think one of the things that the Broncos haven't done this year is beat themselves. And when you go play on the road and you deal with kind of all the added elements of the crowd noise and being in an unfamiliar environment and the momentum that can sometimes go with, that a home team can get playing at home. I mean, just look at how the Broncos against the Colts a few weeks ago, when they started to get rolling at home, now all of a sudden it's a difficult deal for Anthony Richardson and the Colts. So I think one of the things the Broncos have done well is they have not beat themselves, with the exception maybe of last week against the Chargers. And so there needs to be this focus, and Cortland Sutton talked about it, where don't change your process drastically, don't go crazy, but like what's something a little bit extra you can do? And Mike McGlinchey talked about that in the locker room this week of, hey, stick with your process, don't go changing everything just because it's a big game, but what's a little bit extra you can do to make sure that you're ready for this game to get back to the type of football the Broncos have been playing, which is, not having these penalties that are defensively that are extending drives or, kind of playing smart football the way that we've seen for most of the year. over and over you see teams in this league beat themselves, or games are decided by like who loses the game instead of wins it. And we haven't seen the Broncos, quote unquote, lose games a lot. And unfortunately, they did a couple things against the Chargers that put them in a bad spot. So if you can just get back to playing your brand of football, doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It's going to be a tough game. I mean, Joe Burrow, if their record was better, might be the MVP.
Yeah,
they've got
numbers are crazy.
2 of the best receivers in the entire league, and a rusher in Trey Hendrickson that Sean Payton knows well from coaching him in New Orleans. But this is a really good football team in the Bengals. You're going to have to earn it. But if you just play your game, get back to what you do well, and realize the opportunity that's at stake, that we've got to get to 10. Can't worry about, hey, if the Bengals lose next week and the Colts lose and you can get rid of all that stuff by just winning.
Yeah. When you look at the stakes, Suze, after we talked to some of the guys in the locker room, how do you see their mindset going into this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think like throughout the season, we've seen like they really, like Aric just said, they want to control their own destiny. They know that the Bengals are in a situation right now where them making the postseason is going to depend a lot on what happens with other teams, while the Broncos still have the opportunity to kind of control it themselves. And so I really like in the locker room, everybody's word has been urgency, and it's not, like we said, panic, but urgency. And, I think we've seen that throughout the season. Even Bo a few weeks ago said, heading into the last stretch of games here, he was like, we're going to keep doing what we did that got us to this point. Obviously, we've had success up to this point. Just because the stakes are higher doesn't mean that we have to do anything differently, because we wouldn't be where we are if we hadn't stuck to our plan throughout the year. So I like the mindset in the locker room. I think, they seem kind of, I know a lot of the fan base was fazed by the last game, but they seem, ready to get after it again. So I like the mindset and everything I'm hearing from them.
Well, another thing about the road games is how good Broncos country travels. And that's one thing Cortland Sutton had also gave kudos, saying like just the way that they've supported us on the road has also been very helpful. You remember that game in Tampa, Aric, like the way that we were walking off and Broncos chants were breaking out all over the stadium. And this is in Tampa, Florida, a long way from Denver. And so the way that this team has been able to travel and support this team on the road, the guys really feed off of that, especially in these kind of key situations. And getting to 10 is, I like that mindset of, they're not saying like, let's just get to 10. If we get to 10, everything takes care of itself naturally. I think that's one of the main focal points you were focusing on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously where things stand, you can, because the Chiefs won on Wednesday, they now clinch the 1 seed. All 4 times that the Chiefs have previously clinched their playoff spot heading into the last week, Andy Reid has rested his starting quarterback. So you could be looking at a situation where Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Chris Jones, who didn't play yesterday because of an injury, you could be looking at all those guys and not playing next week. But if you're the Broncos, you want that to be for 11, right? You want that to be for win number 11 that could potentially move you up to the 6 seed, to the 5 seed, depending on what happens with the Steelers and the Chargers. If the Steelers lose next week to Cincinnati, they would drop, and the Broncos win their last 2, they would drop below the Broncos. If the Chargers were to lose either of these last 2 games and the Broncos win out, the Chargers would fall below the Broncos. So not out of the question that the Broncos can move up. Certainly, it might be unlikely now that they get up to that 5 seed, but there's still kind of a 7 or 8% chance that happens. I'm interested to see this Chargers game in New England, because just the way that New England played the Bills last week, they were much more competitive than I think a lot of people expected. For the Chargers to have to go across the country, I would just keep your eye on that one based on how banged up the Chargers are. There were some kind of injuries worth monitoring out of L.A. And so if they were to lose that one and the Broncos could then go get a win against Cincinnati, you could be looking at a scenario where you could move up. Now, Pittsburgh, their final game is against Cincinnati, and so if the Broncos eliminate them, how hard is Cincinnati trying in Week 18? It all kind of comes into focus.
But those games tend to always be compared just from a rivalries perspective and the history of those matchups. They tend to play each other hard, especially if there's something for the Steelers to lose. Like, I feel like the Bengals want to ensure that they
Plus, Jamar Chase could be still going against the could be still going for the Triple Crown as a receiver, so that they could still push for it. But that's just, it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that the Broncos could get all the way up to 5. But like you said, 10 is the first goal, right? And you've got to get there to assure yourselves a playoff spot and not have to worry about scoreboard watching next weekend, especially the way the Colts and Dolphins schedule sets up. It gets a little dicey if you don't win either of these next 2. But the Broncos, I think they're frustrated, and I think that's a little bit different than where they've been for after most of their losses this year. Like after the Chiefs loss, it was there was a disappointment and like kind of a shock in the locker room. And they did come back and they blew out the Falcons. So obviously they responded well there. But that week, I remember us talking about, hey, are they going to handle this the right way? Are they going to come out and be just kind of emotionally drained? Or are they going to come out and prove themselves? Going into this matchup against the Bengals, it reminds me more of like the first loss to the Chargers where the Broncos were like, we could have beaten those guys, or the loss to the Ravens where they were, especially defensively, they were like, that's not our brand of football. And then defensively, they came out against the Chiefs, and I know they lost the game, but they held the Chiefs to 16 points. They got after Mahomes. They made some big plays. So if the Broncos, we haven't seen a ton of losses this year, thankfully, but there haven't been a ton of times where the Broncos have been kind of that furious in the locker room after the game. And so everyone's talking about, from a fan perspective, of like, oh, did we let our chance slip away? I think there's a pretty good chance you see this defense come out just angry, fired up, ready to go. And like, man, we've had to sit here for 10 days.
And just sit with this feeling.
Exactly. And so be interested to see, but it's a mindset thing as much as anything. If it's going to be in the rain, if it's going to be kind of gross outside, like who wants it more? Yeah. And certainly the leadership on this team, the way that Bo Nix, Cortland Sutton have talked this week, it's like you can tell they're ready to go.
Yeah, I caught up with Mike McGlinchey earlier this week, and I talked about that, like just kind of how has he seen this team grow from week one to now, and with the success and the resiliency and the adversity they face. And he just said, like, I think we're finally at a place that it's not outrageous to think we're going to win this game. It's not, we've shown that we can win close games. We've shown that we can win big on versus certain opponents. And it's no longer a shock that the Broncos are a team that people are going to put their best foot forward. And granted, yes, it's the National Football League, everyone plays their best, but there's some teams that they're like, oh, like they have a losing record, da-da-da. But with the Broncos, Mike mentioned that it's a team that people are now struggling, like, okay, like we have to prepare for these guys. We have to prepare for, what kind of game is Bo Nix going to have? I mean, Nix is one of the least sacked quarterbacks in the NFL this season. You compare his numbers to someone like Caleb Williams, who's been sacked 30, 50 plus times or something crazy like that. You look at the way that this offensive line has really been protecting their quarterback to lead them to a top, scoring offense. And so when you go against this Bengals team, you're more confident that they can get to that 10. I know everyone's saying, like, well, I believe you asked Bo about that, like just going up against Joe Burrow and him having, like, the confidence in his defense being like, look, like, it's fun going against those guys, but I'm going to play my game too. I heard you ask that question. See, I listened to the pressers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Suze is over there chuckling because Bo mentioned that he doesn't play against Joe Burrow.
Yes, he did. I love that.
I wasn't
going to bring that up. I wasn't going to bring that up.
The question is and he got there. He was being funny. But, like, obviously Burrow's going to put up points no matter who he plays. I mean, if you look at the totals for the Bengals, I think they've scored 24 in 7 consecutive weeks or something like that. Burrow's got a number of games in a row with 250 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think 7 as well. Yeah. He is, and we'll talk about.
Well, he leads the NFL with 4,229 passing yards and 39 passing TDs in 2024.
Yeah, he's playing at an insane level, and we'll talk about.
Their record does not like show that they're 7-8.
They're 7-8. Yeah, but we'll talk more about Burrow in a second here. But yeah, this Bengals team is going to put up points on offense, and so if you're the Broncos, you have to be ready to go. And Denver has scored at least 27 in 5 straight games. They're up to the 10th ranked scoring offense. They've broken 30 in 3 of the last 5 games. If I were guessing, I would think the Broncos very well might need to get back to 30 at least to win this football game. Yeah. And, there's a chance that they can do it. This Bengals defense has struggled. They've been better the last few weeks. But granted, they've played the Titans and the Browns who have struggled this year. Mm-hmm. But this Bengals defense is giving up a significant number of points. And if Bo Nix, it feels to me like this is a statement type opportunity for Bo. And I want to talk about the rain and the weather in a second, but we've seen a lot from Bo Nix, right? Like he's won his first, he earned his first win. He threw his first touchdown pass. He led a fourth quarter comeback. He has responded, in Vegas to a not so great start to win the football game. He's played against Atlanta and Carolina and had 4 touchdowns in those games. And now this is where and I know he's a rookie, but it's like, let's see the next step here, which is go out against another great quarterback and show that you can win a game. And,
you can hold your own.
Yeah, and not that he hasn't shown that, but here's a great opportunity to, and I think he did it in the first half against LA. It was what I was excited to see. But okay, now you've hit a little bit of adversity. This is a playoff type atmosphere. Go play one of your best games of the season. And Sean Payton, as I said before, talked about this team needs to play one of its best games. I think that extends very much to Bo Nix, and I'm excited. I think he's up for it. This is a defense I mentioned that the Bengals have struggled here. Looking at their ranks against teams that are over 500, they're last in points per game allowed. They're 31st in yards per game allowed, last in yards per play, last in passing yards per attempt, 30th in red zone. And they're 0-7 against teams that are 500 or better. So Bo obviously he had a couple rough games there, maybe against the Colts, threw a couple of picks against the Browns. But the way that he was able to bounce back in LA, I thought was impressive. They're going to have a chance, I think, to put up some points. Now, we'll see again. The rain could be interesting. Bo obviously had a tough game in New York. In the second half of that game was much better. Joe Lombardi talked about making sure you've got the right type of footballs ready to go for that game. So it could be a running game where you rely on Aric Estime and Javonte Williams and whoever else, Jaleel McLaughlin. But if Bo Nix has to throw, I think this is a chance for him to go out and say, hey, I'm here now. This is my moment. This is my time. Let's clinch a playoff berth. And I know there's a lot of the attention is on Jaden Daniels, but a chance for Bo Nix to say, I'm right here too.
Yeah. And Bo Nix has 22 passing TDs, which I think is tied with Jaden Daniels for most by a rookie in a season. So I think that's one of the things. This season, yeah. So I think it's one of those matchups that, to your point, you're not trying to measure yourself against them, but it's a way to show, look, I'm here to lead this team and I'm focused on leading. And that's one of the things that really impressed me about Bo is his ability to come in as a rookie and lead this team has a mixture of veterans and and young guys. Suze, what have you seen from Bo and just the way that, whether his mindset or just what you've seen on the field and the numbers he's been able to put up over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, well, I'm excited because the last time he talked about right after a game wanting to get right back out on the field was after the Chiefs game, and then came out the next week against the Falcons and said he decided that morning that he was going to have a really good game. So, I feel like he had the same mindset after the Chargers game, said, I think any of us want to, all of us want to get back on the field right now. So I'm excited to see him bounce back. I think we've seen his ability to do that throughout the season. We've seen his ability to kind of just flush something and realize that he still has an opportunity to embrace. And so, I think there's a great opportunity for him to do that this weekend. And, like we've already said, I think he's shown time and time again that he's up for the challenge. So,
yeah, I think to your point, the run game is also a big emphasis that they've been trying to really hone in on over the last couple of weeks. And Mike McGlinchey mentioned that it takes all 11 guys, or it takes the entire offensive line. Everyone as a team has to get the run game going. He's the receivers serve as distractions. They're able to pick a play, and the running backs find the hole. The offensive line, creates those environments for the running game to get going. You saw Aric Estime really kind of get in a groove. He had his first touchdown of his young career against the Chargers, and similar to what Sue said, that mindset of just I don't know when I'm going to play, but when I go, I'm going to try to make a big impact as you can. When you have Javonte Williams and Aric Estime and Jaleel, which I think was limited in practice earlier this week, if I'm not mistaken. But when you have this corral of running backs, the way that you're able to kind of get things going, I think is really going to open up Bo to kind of have that freedom more to, pass the ball down the field, especially when you're trying to sustain drives in bad weather.
Yeah, I think sustaining drives is one of the keys, right? You not only want to score, but you want to, I think, dominate time of possession. You want to keep Joe Burrow off the field.
Yeah.
One of the things that was impressive about the early performance against the Chargers was those sustained drives of 10 plays, 12 plays. Even to start the second half, they scored a field goal, but it was 6.5 minutes that you took off the clock. If you can do that and run the ball well, you mentioned Estime, he had 9 carries for 48 yards and the touchdown. If you can do that, Estime, Javonte, Jaleel did improve to a full participant, so you'd think he'd be ready to go. And Blake Watson was promoted as well this week, so the Broncos have a lot of options at running back. But this is a game that if you can run the ball well, keep Bo Nix and this offense in second and manageable, third and manageable, that's when this offense really performs well. And I would say the one thing that they did well against the Chargers that is going to have to be the same this week, and it'll be more difficult in whatever conditions there are, is to play turnover-free football. Because we mentioned the Bengals have not played great defensively against the opponents that are over 500 for the season. But over the last 3 weeks, they've forced 11 takeaways, which is the most they've had in a 3-game span in almost 20 years. They allowed 6 points last week. They're down to, 17.7 points per game over the last 3 games. So granted, the opponents haven't been quite the same, and we know the Broncos offense has the juice to score points, but they've got to avoid the turnovers, because it feels like a game, and we'll talk about offensively, or on the other side of the ball with Joe Burrow and the Bengals offense, the challenge they present, but it feels like the type of game where you cannot give Joe Burrow and this offense an extra opportunity, or you cannot, like if you move the ball against this Bengals defense, you got to find a way to score touchdowns and not field goals. And so this time of year, that's what it's about. Everybody who's left, for the most part, has an offense that can move the ball and score points. Can you hold them to field goals? Can you get an occasional takeaway? It's not like the Chargers in the first half of that game last week didn't move the ball, right? But the Broncos held them to a field goal with a big tackle for loss by Zach Allen, and then Chris Abrams-Drain gets an interception. And so those are the big plays. And the Broncos defense, which we'll talk about in just a second, needs to get back to making those big plays. But the Broncos offense as well, it might take a big-time throw on third down from Bo Nix to Courtland Sutton. It might take Javonte Williams or somebody breaking a tackle and getting through the next level and taking off. Yeah. And it's also got to be taking care of the football.
Well, I think what you said right now, the running backs being able to kind of not only bust through, but continue to carry on and go off for a big run. In Week 16, the Bengals rushing defense gave up over 100 yards rushing on 6.2 yards per carry, which wasn't necessarily their biggest name, but they had a few big plays on the Browns side where I think it was early in the game, in the first series, I believe they kind of let off a big run. But I think the difference between that team and the Broncos is that if you get good field position, Bo Nix is going to find the end zone. And that's why Marvin Mims is so crucial. That's why the running game is so crucial to continue playing the game on their side of the field. And so when you kind of look at the offensive weapons that you're potentially going to find, you have Courtland Sutton, who's on the verge of having his first 1,000-yard season. It'd be his first since 2019. And you kind of see their connection kind of get going. I really feel like Marvin Mims has really got involved as of late and in different ways, from special teams to just big explosive plays. And you mentioned it a little earlier where you said it's just not overdoing what you're good at because you just want to make a big play. It's find the right play and it'll turn into a big play versus looking for the big play and then potentially turning the ball over.
Yeah, they've got the guys that they need, and they've shown that. And whether it's Mims or Sutton or Williams or Estime or whoever it might be, it's Troutman. It's been a different guy every week. And
Atkins.
Atkins. You don't know who it's going to be. But you mentioned the Browns game. The Browns had their chances against the Bengals, and it was frustrating from some degree if you're a Broncos fan to watch that and be like, man, how are the Browns not in this? How are they not leading this football game? They were at the 1-yard line early in the game with a chance to take an early lead, and they fumble the ball at the 1-yard line. Later, DTR throws a pick in the end zone. There's another pick later. And it's so they showed that they can get these opportunities. They can move the ball. I would think the Broncos would be able to move the ball too. Though again, if it's pouring, it's kind of like the great equalizer that you don't really know how it's going to
and
impact
ball security,
the game.
just making sure it's holding on to the football.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But so you've got to be just ready to go down in the red zone, especially. And the Broncos have been, this year they've been better in the red zone. They've found a way to convert on those opportunities, but they've got to keep doing it. And listen, if they've averaged 30 points per game in wins, it feels like, hey, if you can get there and you're the Broncos, you're never assured anything. It's never a guarantee, but might be where they need to get to get a win this weekend and clinch a playoff berth.
Yeah. After practice, Pat Surtain talked about the Bengals playmakers and understanding you're going to have to face Joe Burrow. You're going to have to face Jamar Chase, which he said is one of, if not the best wide receiver in the NFL. And then you have T. Higgins, who's had a touchdown in 5 of his last 6 games. And Jamar has posted 75-plus yards in 6 straight games. So Burrow has a way of distributing the ball and really finding his key guys. And Pat mentioned, it's about taking them out of it. And it's about eliminating the massive big plays, the ones that can really hurt you, or even if you hold them to a field goal, the ones that can hurt you just from morale perspective of just you don't want to let big play after big play happen against your defense. And I feel like with the play of, safety Brandon Jones and the way that Pat has been playing this season, they have a good opportunity to, I'm not going to say completely take them away because they are who they are. Jamar Chase is a very good wide receiver, but you have an opportunity to not have them hurt. He could have a great game, but still lose. So I think that's one of the focal points. And I believe Surtain has a lot of passer rating of 39.1 when targeted this season. I mean, he has been playing just ridiculously and put on a clinic in particular when he's up against those top receivers. Yeah,
I saw a stat yesterday that if you threw the ball into the ground on every play, you would have a better passer rating than if you targeted Pat Surtain. He's played at an All-Pro. That would be better than what they're doing right now, going at Pat. Yeah, I think he's made the big plays. Obviously, the pick 6 against the Raiders. Had a couple of he's tied his career high in interceptions this year. Pat, and just to go off on a little bit of a tangent about him.
Go off, Ferg.
This to me is, if he's not the defensive player of the year, can corners win it anymore? Because
that's a hot take.
It's not. I don't think it's that hot of it. He's shutting guys down and taking number 1 receivers out of the equation every single week. He's the best player on a defense that is, I think 4th in scoring defense. Mm-hmm. He is also making key plays in terms of interceptions, PBUs. And it's not like there's a dominant, normally it feels like voters just look at who has the most sacks, which is Trey Hendrickson right now. Mm-hmm. And the Broncos will have to have a plan for him. But it's nobody's taking guys out of the game more than Pat Surtain. And it feels like over the last few years, there's been more of an appreciation for what shutdown corners do and the lack of targets and how they take guys out of games. And it's it feels like it would be appropriate for Surtain, who was Surtain's stat line when he was Defensive Player of the Month was 2 pass breakups and 12 tackles for the entire month because nobody throws at him. Yeah. And it might be time for people to say, hey, we acknowledge what Pat Surtain can do. We acknowledge how impressive what he's doing is every week. And but I don't know how he's supposed to be any better. Yeah. And he's widely considered right now the best cornerback in the game. And it's what is a defensive player of the year supposed to look like if it's not this? Because he's eliminating half the field and he's taking away the top guy and he's making big plays. And I don't know, maybe if he does it in this standalone game and takes Jamar Chase out of the game, maybe that's enough. It's not going to be easy because
you take it for granted almost because he's so good that you don't hear his name that much. And it's because they're literally just not throwing the ball in his direction. And it's a big problem for obviously the offenses that are planning against him. But for the Broncos, it's the fact that you can plug him against anybody, whether it's wide receiver 1, 2, whoever, the tight end. It doesn't he will fill in whatever gap he needs to fill in and make a play. Leading the Broncos 4 interceptions and passes defended this season. He tied a career high in interceptions this year. When that was his rookie season, the last time he had 4 interceptions.
Yeah, and that's when people threw at him. Now they don't throw at him. And he still found it he's taking advantage of the opportunities when they are coming his way. Brock Bowers has torn the league up. When Pat gets on him, he doesn't do anything. And Jamar Chase he's playing at an insane level. He's on pace to be the first player to ever have 1,700 receiving yards and 17 touchdowns in a season. He's about to tie the most receiving touchdowns of 30-plus yards in a season since at least 2000. I mean, there's like a whole page of notes about how good Jamar Chase is, and T. Higgins is just as good, and they've got a good slot guy. So it helps that Riley Moss could be back. It seems like he's at least working in that direction to play, because if he can, and it's like, hey, welcome back, Riley. Here's your reward is guarding T. Higgins or Jamar Chase, right? Like that's
nice
quite the welcome back present.
Well, I know Pat had mentioned that obviously we don't know if Riley's going to play as we're recording this, but Pat had mentioned just having him out there again and just having him in practice and, just running alongside him is like, that's also good for this team. But you talked about the potential matchup with Pat and Chase. Suze, you got a stat line of Pat and versus Chase? Because last time the Bengals played the Broncos was back in 2021.
Yep, and that day he had 1 reception for 3 yards when Surtain was lining up against him. So on 4 of his 25 routes. So
I mean, it wasn't
bars. Well, it's a career low in receptions and receiving yards for Jamar Chase at that time. Granted, that was years ago, but you look at that's why you like these matchups, though, because of what could happen, what has happened. And Pat has just gotten better from that matchup because they were both different players at that time.
Yeah. I mean, it was limited, right? Like only 4 routes. So we'll see kind of how that plays out. It was a small sample size. I would think that Pat would see a lot more than 4 routes from
you would think.
than Chase this week. But obviously a good start. But I think, as Pat said the other day, like it was a long time ago, and obviously kind of different. Like at that point, Pat was still working his way to where he is now, and so
you got a taste of what that could be, and then they'll play each other for 3 years.
Exactly. Yeah, but this listen, you got to slow down the Bengals running game because they've gotten going there a little bit. You've got to find a way to pressure Joe Burrow. Burrow has been kind of under siege a little bit. That offensive line has dealt with some injuries.
Yeah. 4 sacks last week, I believe.
Yep, they've allowed some pressure, and obviously Denver's got the most sacks in the league. From a comparison standpoint, when Burrow's not pressured, 74.6 completion percentage, 26 touchdowns, 5 picks, 112.3 passer rating. When he does face pressure, it drops 20 points in his completion percentage. Still 13 touchdowns, 3 picks, 98.4. So it's not like he has
less picks when he's pressured than when he's not.
Yeah, they've allowed. There's more plays obviously where he's not pressured, so it's more of kind of a rate there. But he's going to be good regardless. Like we said, he's an MVP type player. 3 touchdown passes in 7 straight games. Which is the 4th longest streak in NFL history. First player in NFL history with 250 pass yards and 3 pass touchdowns in 7 consecutive games.
There's like a whole page on him, right? In the research notes?
on just Burrow.
On Burrow and Chase. Like
the 4th player ever to have 40 touchdowns and 10 or fewer picks in a single season. And so they are playing at a high level. And when Burrow faces top 5 scoring defenses, he's just as good. He's got 22 touchdowns, 1 pick. I mean,
we need a bad stat.
There's not, because he's just playing at a really high level. So what you've got to do is you've got to find. He's taken the 2nd most hits in the NFL. So you've got to find a way to hit him.
Yeah.
You've got to find a way to slow down Chase Brown. If Chase Brown gets going and they're in these 3rd and shorts, and the other thing is you've got to make sure with Riley coming, if he does come back, that the communication is on the right page, because Sean Payton talked about, hey, we've got 5 dropped coverages against the Chargers, and maybe some of that is a short week, who knows. But against these guys, they'll just tear you up if you leave Jamar Chase or T. Higgins open or with room to run. That's the other thing Sean Payton mentioned about with Jamar Chase is it's not just when he catches the ball, it's then that he's so strong that he can take off and run for. I mean, we saw it against, I think it was in Dallas, the touchdown that clinched the game. He catches it short. It's like a 10-yard catch, and then he takes off down the sideline. No one can bring him down, and he scores the game-clinching touchdown. So Broncos are going to have to tackle well. Again, keep bringing up the weather, but if it's gross out, like make them uncomfortable
Yeah.
Don't let them, tackling might be a little more difficult. Don't let them break
Find
free.
their groove, yeah.
That's where, again, I think it goes back to the attitude of this team and being ready for like a tough physical game in gross weather in December. But the benefit is that you'd much rather be in the locker room after the game feeling gross and all that with a win than with a loss.
Than just feeling gross, basically. I do want to give a shout out to safety Brandon Jones because I found a stat in all the praise of Burrow and Chase in the research packet. Safety Brandon Jones is first, alongside with Pat, who's third, but they're both ranked top 3 in lowest passer rating allowed in coverage in 2024 with a minimum 40 targets as the nearest defender. You look at the list, he's at number 1. Yeah, Marlon Humphrey at number 2, Pat Surtain at number 3, and then Derek Stingley Jr. at 4. So the way that other guys have stepped up around this team and found ways to do it, I think that's what makes this defense impressive. And you mentioned them coming out and being potentially angry and just wanting to show what they're able to do. I mean, you have a primetime game. Saturday games are, they're close. Basically, to me, that's primetime because there's only, 3 games on Saturday. Your Broncos are the second one of the day, and nothing else is on. And people are hungry for football, especially playoff AFC picture caliber football. And so I think with this game, the way that this defense has been able to step up, I feel like Brandon Jones, Jonathan Cooper, Nick Bonito, Zach Allen, those guys are really going to try to make an impact early because they know if you let Joe Burrow and Chase find their groove, like that's a recipe for disaster. You need to have them struggle and be uncomfortable, to start this game. And when you look at the way this defense is going to be able to bounce back, what's one guy that you're really looking at to have a key big game? Yeah,
I think Nick Bonito's got to get back to where he's been playing.
Suze, you're next. So.
The Broncos struggled to get after Justin Herbert. Granted, the Chargers have 2 really incredible tackles in Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater. The Bengals offensive line has struggled a little bit more. Some of their, I think Mims was limited on the last practice report we saw. But you got to be able to get after Burrow because if he stands back there and he's in a clean pocket all day, there's no way that you're going to be able to get the stops that you need to get. Bonito, people have talked about him as a potential defensive player of the year. Well, this is a chance. He scored 2 defensive touchdowns. This is a chance. Go get another strip sack. Go make a game-changing play. Incredible bend by Bonito. But, this is the game where he's got to make a big play. And we've seen, the Bengals played well and scored points against the Steelers a few weeks ago. But I think it was their last loss. But TJ Watt strip sacked Burrow, and it was a huge turning point in the game as Burrow got out of the pocket. And so can Bonito do the same type of thing? Because I think Denver's going to need a big play here, a big play there. And I know the Jets have struggled over the rest of the year, but it kind of reminds me of going into New York. The weather was bad. The Jets at that time, people thought, hey, this is going to be a high-powered offense. Mm-hmm. And Denver set the tone from the very first series, right? Justin Sternai gets a sack on the first play. Mm-hmm. They force a fumble on the first drive. And it was like, okay, they're here to play. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about there, that can the defense set the tone early and not let this be, because the other thing is we've seen this team play complementary football so much where, hey, if the Broncos score, think about that Colts game. The Broncos finally score, and then boom, Nick Bonito gets a touchdown and puts it out of reach. Against the Chargers, the Broncos scored, but then they let the Chargers go right down and score a touchdown. Or the Broncos score again, and then they let the Chargers go right down and score again. And so the complementary football of both sides playing well at the same time wasn't happening as much. So they've got to find a way to get back to that, and I think it starts with Nick Bonito.
Suze?
Yeah, I agree. I think Bonito's got to get back to the way that we've seen him play. There are plenty of guys that I think I could pinpoint as ones that I would love to see make a play. I think Cooper could make a big play in this game. PJ Locke could make a play. I think, honestly, when you have a quarterback like Joe Burrow, who Vance Joseph mentioned yesterday is very good at finding the second option and being able to still make a play when things aren't going to plan. We saw in the last game, he had that insane touchdown pass when he was about to fall on his knees and was still able to make a play. So I think when you have a quarterback like that who's just able to find a way, I think it's going to take everybody stepping up and having big plays come from maybe somebody unexpected.
Yeah. And I think to piggyback off of your answer too, I'm looking at Jonathan Cooper and just that dynamic duo that Bonito and Cooper have been over the last couple of weeks and the way they complement each other, especially when putting pressure on the quarterback, and then Zach Allen kind of comes in as the big brother and just kind of, pancakes guys. So I think getting back to that trio, that tandem of that front defensive line that has been wrecking, quarterbacks all season. Like you mentioned, they lead the NFL in sacks with 51. The Broncos franchise record in sacks is 57. That was set in 1984. So like you said, if they can get back to them these next two games, I mean, they're not worried about that record, but I'm saying that number in the sense of like, look how close they are, and they were playing their game. If they get back to that, you can see them really kind of changing momentum of the game, especially because we don't know what's going to happen in that Chiefs game, whether they're going to rest their quarterback or not. But you don't want to wait for that. You want to just kind of handle what you need to handle in Cincinnati. It's a really big road game. Again, it's a Saturday game, 2:30 Mountain Time here in Denver for Broncos country to watch. As we close out the pod, what are your final thoughts as we kind of head into the final road game of the regular season?
Yeah, I just think this is a good team, and it's going to take, again, the best effort the Broncos might take the best game they've played all year, including the near win in Kansas City against a team that is, 14-1 at this point, 15-1.
Should have been 13-2. I had to do math real quick.
Like they lost to the Chiefs by 1. They lost to the Ravens by 3. They lost to the Ravens again by 1. They lost to the Steelers and Chargers by a touchdown or less. Like, this is a team that's been in every game, and so they're 0-7 against teams that are 500 or above. But it just doesn't. They feel like a playoff team, and they feel like even some of the teams that Denver's played that are quote unquote in the like. I'm not going to call out specific teams, but they are just. I think this is one of the toughest teams they've played all year, and the fact that it is on the road. In a place where, Broncos fans still travel everywhere, but like it's going to be a loud stadium. It's going to be hostile. The weather is going to play, I think, a big factor if it does indeed rain during the game. But I kind of go back to overall, when you are in this situation where it's a big game and it is a test against one of the best offenses in the entire NFL, what does your quarterback have for you? And I think this is a chance for Bo Nix to just light it up. And it might not even be lighting it up in terms of the number of passes or passing yards, but just like go out there and play your game, make big plays when you have to. If you have to get outside the pocket and make plays with your legs, do it. But I feel like Bo is going to show up, and this is a rise to the occasion type game for Bo. And I'm excited to watch him go do that. Have
you been to that stadium before? I
have. The last time the Broncos played there was 2018, and Phillip Lindsay ran wild. He won AFC Offensive Player of the Week honors. It's been a while since Denver's been in Cincinnati, but yeah, I think you need Bo to go have perhaps his best game as a pro.
Yeah. The Broncos have won 7 of the last 10 matchups against the Bengals, and then particularly again, like at home, you want to make sure that they stay home because that's the situation that the Bengals are in. It's a win or stay home for them. You don't want to give them any hope. It's just like handle business on the road. I think what Sue said earlier, they're using the word urgency, not panic, because it's just the urgency. Like, let's get this done. But they also understand, like, we're trying to play football for much, much deeper into January and February. So this is just another test to do that, whether it's on the road or at home. But Suze, what are your final thoughts as we close out altitude?
Yeah, I mean, a huge game, like we've already said, especially on the road when their season's on the line, and there's a lot at stake for the Broncos too. And I think this feels like one of those games that's going to come down to like which team can find a way to win. And, we've seen the Bengals in a lot of these close games where they've still put up crazy numbers and haven't found that way to win. And then we've seen the Broncos in some of these hard-fought games where they have found that way to win. So especially if the weather's a factor, I think it's really going to come down to like who can make that extra play to get the job done.
And, shootouts are fun, but they're also they give me a lot of anxiety. I don't want to shoot out. I want the defense to go out, handle business, and just put this game away. But we're really excited, obviously, for this matchup. A lot at stake in the AFC playoff race as the Broncos need one more win to punch their ticket into the postseason. So we appreciate you guys listening to another episode of Altitude Advantage. I am your host and team reporter, Elisa Hernandez. I have my twin across the table, lead writer on DenverBroncos.com, Aric DiLalla, and the triplet to our little duo here. Actually, duo was 2, but I couldn't think of the word for that. Trio. There you go. Our trio digital media contributor, Susanna Ware. We are twinning. Shout out to Unreal for the awesome sweaters. And we appreciate Broncos country. And we will see you guys next week.